We have highlighted that the fact that the Canada-US border is the longest unmilitarized border in the world is something that has benefited our two countries and our both economies tremendously, and we feel that it needs to remain that way.
Canada is strongly opposed to this US proposal, and we have made that opposition very, very clear to our American counterparts, and we will continue to do so.
Coronavirus fears push Canada and the U.S. toward a flashpoint in the relationship. Hi there, and welcome to Power and Politics. I'm Vashi Capellos. The federal government is urging the Trump administration not to deploy troops to the Canada-U.S. border. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland calls it an unnecessary step that is, quote, damaging to relations between the two countries. Right now, President Trump is considering the move. CBC News, though, has learned it would involve no more than 1,000 American soldiers along the 9,000-kilometer border, stationed 30 kilometers back. We're going to speak very shortly about this with Canada's new ambassador to the United States. But first, we want to give you a quick snapshot of the spread of COVID-19 in this country right now. Take a look at your screen. We are nearing 4,000 cases, and that number has tripled over the last 5 days. 39 deaths in this country are linked to COVID-19. Globally, there are now more than 500,000 cases, 523,000, as you can see there, more than 23,000 deaths as well. Today, Spain topped China in its number of deaths, making it the second hardest hit nation behind Italy. Let's turn back now to the situation between the U.S. and Canada. President Trump is slated to speak this hour, but first, Kirsten Hillman is Canada's newly appointed ambassador to the United States, official ambassador. She's occupied the role for a number of months. I spoke with her just last hour from Washington. Hi, Ambassador Hillman. Thanks very much for making time for us, and congratulations on your new official job, I should say.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be with you.
Ambassador, this is your first day, as I said, officially on the job, but you already have a major issue to deal with. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland said this morning that you have had conversations with people at the State Department about the U.S. potentially stationing troops near the Canadian border. What's your understanding of what's being proposed and why it has been proposed?
Well, you know, what's being proposed and why are really questions I think that the Americans need to answer. But what I can tell you is that the message that I have given clearly and firmly is that we have an incredibly effective and an incredibly efficient Canadian border with the United States, as evidenced by the fact that last week we were able to put in place on very short notice some pretty major restrictions on travel, and it was cooperative and it was collaborative and it was successful. So this kind of potential move by the United States I don't think is necessary. I don't think it's helpful. It sends the message that there's a problem at the border, which there most certainly is not. And that's a message that I have been conveying forcefully and clearly here.
Once you convey that message, once you have been conveying it, what is the response like?
You know, our interlocutors have been listening. They clearly have been listening. They've spoken to not only me, but Minister Sagen, Minister Blair, and others within our government. I think they know exactly what we think.
Is it fair to say that you and your colleagues that you just listed off were taken by surprise by the suggestion?
Well, it is something that we had heard of for a few days now. I mean, initially, yes, it was something that we were surprised by, but as I say, we've been talking about it now and with the Americans for a couple of days.
Can I ask you, and we are attempting to ask the Americans as well about this, but the reasoning that's being put forth through us via channels in the Canadian government is something to do with border crossers, with irregular border crossers. My understanding, even though this has been a big issue in Canada in the past, is that very few actually attempted to cross in the days preceding the agreement that the Americans and Canadians settled on last Friday, and only 6, I think, have attempted to cross since. Does that reasoning add up at all to you?
So again, without commenting on what their reasoning might be, happy to comment on the facts with respect to border crossings as between Canada and the United States. And you're absolutely right, the numbers are very small, and since our measures went into place just last week, they've been virtually, non-existent. There are a few. I'm not sure I can, as of right now, what the exact number is, but they're in the single digits, that's for sure.
Do you have a sense at all, and I take your point on not wanting to comment on the reasoning, but I think Canadians are sort of trying to figure out why this might be happening. Do you have a sense at all if it's about something beyond that idea of border crossers?
Yeah, again, I think I'm going to have to say that that's something for our American friends to answer. I don't want to speculate on their reasons. I just want to say that I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it's necessary. And I think it sends all the wrong messages about a border relationship that is longstanding, unmilitarized since the beginning of our country, and needs to stay that way.
Beyond Ambassador sending the wrong message, is there anything material that would change? Is there any sort of substantive impact of militarizing the border?
I guess it depends on what it is that they do and how they do it, and that is something that I'm really not in a position to talk about. I don't really know. I
guess what I'm trying to ascertain is whether or not the government and yourself are opposed to it because of the message that it sends, because of the sort of significance in that respect, or if there are tangible things that you are opposed to.
We're opposed to it because of the message that it sends, and we're opposed to it. And the message that it sends is that there is something that needs to be fixed, and as I say, there isn't. It's an extremely successful collaboration at the border, and so it's not necessary, and it sends a message that there's a problem, and there isn't.
If you were to characterize the status of these discussions, is this something that is still a ways off? Like, is there reason to believe that yourself and the Canadian government might be successful in staving it off? How would you characterize it, I guess, for our viewers?
Well, the conversations are ongoing and they're active.
Okay, let me switch topics and ask you about the spread of coronavirus and sort of the relationship between our two countries and how that all factors in. We know that the president is openly talking about reopening sections of the American economy, walking back stringent public health measures. He's talking about a date of the Easter weekend. That does fly in the face of what we've heard from public health experts who are telling us to remain socially distant, for example. How serious do you think the president is about reopening the economy?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would mention is that in the United States, the measures that are put into place with respect to social distancing and the either recommendations or the actual directives that are being made for citizens are happening at the state level. So the last count I had, there were 32 or 35 states that had put in place some sort of orders around shelter in place, shelter at home. They're all a little bit different, but there's the same direction. So those are state level measures. And so if they're going to be withdrawn, they'll be withdrawn by the levels of government that put them in, which, as I say, are state and local levels.
So does that mean, I don't want to misinterpret it, are you saying that regardless of what the president says about reopening the economy, Canadians should rest assured about the public health measures being taken in that country?
I think that Canadians, what's important for Canadians to understand is that our government, since day one, has been adopting measures in the face of this virus that are based on facts and they're based on science. And as the situation evolves, and it is evolving very quickly, we are adjusting to what is happening on the ground. So the border measures that we put in place with the United States last week are an exact example of us adjusting to the facts on the ground. If the facts on the ground with respect to Canada and the United States evolve, then we may make other decisions, and it will just depend on what's happening at the time.
Does that mean that the door is open to more restrictive measures at the border? Is that a possibility? I take your point that obviously it depends on the circumstances, but if in fact the circumstances do evolve in a way that the president has outlined, is that off the table?
I think, the Prime Minister has said that nothing's off the table. So I think that it's important to know that for us, nothing's off the table, and we will be guided by science, and we will be guided by what's in the best interests of Canadians. And our priority, first and foremost, is the health and the safety of Canadians.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time, Ambassador. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Really nice to talk to you virtually from a long social distance.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.